And on that line, I am thrilled to introduce our next conversation. We're bringing expertise from local and from Singapore and across the world. San Francisco, Singapore, and Seoul are the locations of our next conversation, which we're really thrilled about. But very different perspectives from different parts of the world in a very deep expertise around safety in online gaming, which is a huge cutting-edge industry here and one that is growing exponentially worldwide. So we're keen to get these expert views on this topic. So please join me in giving a big, warm South Summit welcome to back to the stage, Austin Arensberg, head of Okta Ventures. New to the stage, Kieran Donovan, CEO at KID. And new to the stage, Yae Won Jin, visiting professor at Yonsei University. Folks, thanks you for being here. Woo!
Deja vu, I was up on stage like an hour ago. All right, so this panel, we're gonna talk about games, but not necessarily about all the fun things in gaming. We're actually gonna talk about safety, and in particular, child safety in the gaming industry, which has become an increasingly important issue in the past few years, with a lot of growing awareness of not only the threats, but also new tools to protect children and their gaming activities. My name is Austin Arensberg. I run Okta Ventures. It's the venture capital arm of Okta, the cybersecurity company. And among many other things, we protect both users' identity and employees' identity. And one of the companies that we have invested in is a company called KID, which Kieran is representing today. And we are also operating here, Okta's also operating here in Korea with an office that we opened up a few years ago. And so what I wanted to do in this panel was bring together some folks that are truly experts on the gaming industry in Asia, and also talk about the really pressing issues that we have on child safety. So that's a bit of introduction on myself. I'll actually pass it over to Kieran to give a brief introduction on what you're up to and what you're doing, and then we'll pass on to Yae Won Jin as well, visiting professor from Yonsei.
Thanks very much, Austin. So it's great to be here. So as Austin said, my name's Kieran Donovan. I'm a co-founder and the CEO of KID. And we are fundamentally reshaping the way that kids and teens access online worlds. One of the biggest challenges that we've seen today is that there can be all sorts of challenges when you are anyone under the age of 13 in many markets, if you're a teenager in many markets, and you want to get access to online communities, you want to build your identity online. A lot of your friends at school are on these online communities. And we know that there are so many challenges, whether it be social media, gaming, or other spaces that kids are interacting online, partly because of kids themselves and the way that online community evolves, but also because of a lot of the dangers that we're really becoming aware of when it comes down to the way that kids can interact with, or that other people can interact with kids online. And that's really the core of our work.
Awesome, thanks for that quick intro. And Yae Won, can you talk about some of your work?
Hello, everyone. My name is Yae Won Jin, and I'm a visiting professor at Yonsei University, and I'm also a principal researcher at the Game and Science Institute, which is the only independent game research institute in Korea. So I've spent last 15 years also working in the game industry, like companies like NCSoft and Riot Games, and also doing research and my PhDs. So my current research goal will be to try to understand the various ways that gaming or the digital technology is in relationship with our human beings. And especially with, I'm interested in bridging some gaps between industry and research, and also to develop a new methodology and new ways to generate knowledge for a post-digital society for a future generation.
So probably the best place to start is for you to ask a couple questions about the landscape. What are the challenges that children are facing in Korea, or frankly anywhere around the world, involving gaming?
I think child safety issue is a very paramount issue that we should actually really be careful about. So in general, we can think about them being exposed to harmful contents, or to like inappropriate language, or like nowadays more growing the exploitation, like bad adults are like reaching out to them and then like trying to get something out of the children. But but we have to be really careful because like they're still in their developmental phase and their cognitive development is still in the process. And then the games can be a very formative in a way that it could serve as an education opportunity for them because they actually learn a lot of like transferable skills from gameplay like teamwork or the digital literacy. But then, however, still, if we cannot balance the access and engagement with the safety and privacy, there is so much like harmful stuff that can happen to children.
And what have some of your research been focused on? What are some of the insights that you've found on the challenges these children face? The research that you've been conducting.
Oh, so research-wise, I'm focusing on one of the research we're running multinationally is focusing on looking into various ways people engage excessively with gaming. So we're interviewing gaming adolescents to adults with gaming disorder issues who would actually get treatment. And then in the process, when I talk to adolescents, I realized that all the 12 years old kids are playing 15-year-old older games, that they're not allowed to go into those games. So they're using their parents' IDs to get into it. But then that means they don't have like enough understanding of what kind of information that they are providing. And also they are really exposed to the contents that are not supposed to be exposed. So those are the things that I've recently realized.
So I find it really fascinating myself that it's 2024 and only now are there beginning to be startups addressing child safety in gaming. The gaming industry is 40 years old now. We've been having extremely violent video games since probably, would you say, the 90s? Why is it that the industry has been so far behind? And then secondly, I'll come back to you and sort of say, what's the regulatory landscape right now today? But why is it that the gaming companies haven't gotten ahead of this?
I think there's always been a desire to do the right thing and to build the community in the right way. But the big challenge has been that a lot of the risk, particularly in the US environment, the second you acknowledge that you have a youth audience, the risk of regulatory enforcement is so high. And if you get it wrong, the penalties can be so significant that the industry has almost moved to this, I confirm I'm over 13 and over by default approach. And the danger of that is that there's this general awareness that there are younger audiences, and in some cases anywhere from like 10 to 70% based on a lot of the interactions we have, are under that minimum age. And until there is that regulatory push and the complexity involved in dealing with the problem is such that the industry needs to do something about it, there hasn't really been that incentive to do the right thing. I think the other thing is we've seen with a lot of modern games that the youth audience can actually be a really powerful tool. It can be a really great community builder for young people. We're actually seeing, and a lot of the research that we've been involved in is around some of the benefits of, particularly for kids that may not be as socially comfortable in the real world, they can actually build their community online. And so we're seeing increasingly opportunities to build meaningful spaces for kids online, and we've seen that demonstrated with, environments in gaming especially. And so I think now there's both the commercial and the regulatory environment where it makes sense to properly engage with and support younger players.
That's good to hear. And then, Yae Won, what is going on in Korea? What are the regulations? Obviously, this is a central hub for gaming, but are there regulations to protect children here?
Yes. As you might all know, Korea has like highest like gamer penetration. So like saw the recent research saying that 90% of the boys between age 10 and 19 are playing games, and then girls it's a little bit less, but it's still 72% or something. So like together they're making up 80%. So, but in a country where it is so competitive and there's a lot of educational pressure, so gaming has been kind of a hindrance to education to most of the parents. So one of the well-known regulation would be shutdown. Have you heard about it? It's a
No.
kind of a Cinderella rule that kids under 16 are not allowed to play any games after from midnight to 6 a.m. So it happened to one of the professional players playing in an international competition, and his account was shut down when it was midnight in Korean time. So
I'm sure he was upset by that.
Yeah, it was in the national news and stuff. So that's been in place for a while, and right now, like after 2022, it was repealed because of like it's so invasive, and they're not giving enough freedom to children. So, but now it's in like game time selection system. So the parents can actually discuss with the children, and then they can set a specific time that they can play, and they're not allowed to logging into the game after like when it's not allowed. And the other thing would be so there are several more, but it's slipping my mind right now.
And some of these regulations have been passed. They're actually into law now.
Yes.
So that actually brings up a really good point, which is the mechanisms for controlling children's use of games. I mean, how is a very important question. How do you do this? You mentioned a Cinderella rule. At midnight, the kids' gaming gets cut off. But are there other mechanisms that are more fine-tuned? Can you talk maybe a little bit about how KID works specifically? As if, to the parents in the audience, what exactly does the product do that will enable them to have a better sense of the safety of their children?
Yeah, so the first challenge, if you're building an online space today, is how do you navigate all of this? And we just heard about Korea. What if I told you in Australia, the way you define a child is actually a different age. It's anyone under the age of 15. And if you're in the US, everybody knows it's 13. If you're in certain countries in the Middle East, it's 20 or 21. So if you're going to build your back end to segment and define policies for your users, that's where you start. You then have to figure out, well, how do I deal with chat? What if, can they add friends? How do I deal with advertising? What about loot boxes within the game? There is different regulation in each of those places, and they apply differently to those younger user segments. In some cases, both younger kids and teens. So that's the space that you're dealing with. That's a challenge, and you have to build the back end to support that. And in the past 90 days, we've had more than 55 regulations passed around the world that impact one of those things. So that's the pace of change, and that's what you have to keep up with.
You said in the past, how long?
90 days.
90 days, there's been 55 new regulations.
Yeah, right.
Is it a system? I mean, we've seen in privacy laws that GDPR was passed in Europe, and they were leading the charge for privacy. We've seen it in other areas as well. Is there a country in the world that is leading the charge for child safety in gaming?
I mean, I think what the e-safety commissioner in Australia is doing, Julie has done a lot of fantastic work there to really drive the right philosophy around how to approach kids online. And one of the things that is close to our heart is if you can solve the complexity and you can show an online platform, hey, it's not hard, it's not impossible to engage younger users in the right way, in a safe way, and you bolt on all of the parental oversight and engagement on top of that, and you give that to them, and it's affordable and cost-effective, whether you're an indie publisher or a AAA, then they'll do it. And that's, I think, the piece that's been missing. And even last week where we saw Instagram announce teen accounts, it's 2024. and we're now getting to that point where Instagram is now adding all of that teen functionality and all of the parent functionality as part of it. And so I think one of the things about what Australia's doing is looking at that. How do we look at being inclusive rather than exclusive of kids? Because if we can do that, now those kids aren't invisible online. Now we can bring parents into that conversation. We can bring them into the experience. And in some ways, we actually open up a digital conduit to build a bridge between younger users who are building so much of their community online and appreciate value and assets in a digital world. Like my 8-year-old, he is way more interested in buying virtual assets in Pokemon Go and hats and whatnot than he is getting a physical gift. So if I can do that, if there's a conduit through which I can do that safely, and I know he's there and I know what he's doing, and I can empower him online, that's really the approach. And we're very close with the eSafety Commissioner's work and driving the philosophy around that.
Maybe I'll shift the gears. I mean, we're here in Suwon. It's within 20 miles of where we are. We have global phone production, TVs, you name it. This is like a consumer hub, electronics hub unlike any other in the world. Do the large chaebols, the electronics chaebols, the Samsungs, the LGs, the groups that have their fingers all across the mobile device ecosystem, do they care about child safety? Are there any examples that you see of them thinking about their software ecosystem at all?
I don't think their role is actually to be really intact with actual child engagement, but there are many Korean gaming companies, the big companies like NCSoft or Nexon, they are building more initiative like above the governmental regulations. So like the basic things that they do is doing like age verification, which is also kind of a problem in its own way because of how we do age verification. But then they also require parental consent, and then they provide this information about playtime and in-game purchases to parents if they want to look into what their children is doing. And so those are the basic things that they are working on. But then they're very interested in building like AI tools to detect the harmful languages or the harmful behaviors in game in real time to like kind of regulate those behaviors. And the more interesting things would be them running this like playing smart campaign kind of thing, which is built around the educating the parents and players that how to be careful in online environment, and also like they're also providing this information about different games to parents, because parents don't exactly know they know Roblox, but they don't know exactly which content of Roblox their kid is playing. So there are companies trying to build more like active initiatives around that. And some companies are also building age-specific contents, like PUBG is like 18 plus game, but then they're taking out some violence and those kind of stuff to make it more child-friendly.
One of the things that sort of blows my mind, and this goes the same actually with privacy regulations, is that you can have the EU create one standard, then the United States create another, then Korea create another, Australia. How does the industry begin to standardize these definitions that you have, or is that not even possible? Do you have any sense on that?
So we're trying to solve it, and we've thought long and hard about it. I don't think a standard will happen because the cultural nuances that exist in different places around the world are very particular to those places. And I'll give you a really specific example. We're working with a number of governments in Africa right now, and it's really challenging to build online safety tools that parents can use to engage with their kids when only 52% of the population have access to broadband internet, and most of those are under the age of 21. And so I think what's really what's unique is we actually don't want to create common standards globally. What we want to be able to do is respect those cultural nuances and build tools that can adapt quickly and respect those particular nuances. Because one of the challenges that we've seen early on is if you only build for fast broadband environments where you have high internet penetration, then there are a lot of kids that are left behind. And that, I think, is where it's important to respect those local cultural nuances. And I think it can be done. And I think technology is at a point right now where you can navigate all of that and adapt to the age-appropriate experiences in each of those markets.
It strikes me that the people that can actually make the standards are not necessarily the governments. They're not going to be coordinating with each other. Are there any initiatives that are going on within the gaming companies, either in Korea or other places, where they're collaborating together to create standards?
Do you know?
So we're a part of a number of bodies that are looking at this. I think one of the challenges is when you're trying to form a standard, you have to pick something that you can build a standard around. You can't bite off the whole thing out of the gate. And so one of those things is age verification and age assurance. Having higher confidence signals around how old someone is when they come into
How does that work, actually? I mean, how does a child verify their age? Do they have a driver's license? I mean, what is the mechanisms and the tools that people are using today?
So it's a good question. I mean, where the industry is trending is toward using on-device facial age estimation, which is where it basically is a selfie that can use an ML model to determine how old you are within a certain range. And there's lots of sensitivities and concerns that industry has around that. But I think fundamentally, one of the biggest challenges is you have huge environments, huge communities of users where you already know how old someone is. And in some cases, you have parents who have validated how old their child is. The problem is that as you move from one place to another, you're asked again and again and again, oh, how old are you? How old are you? How old are you? And so there's no passporting of that age signal across the internet. And what that means is that, and a lot of the government answer is, well, we'll introduce age verification every single time, which is not a great business model because it's prohibitively expensive. And I think we've done the calculation that if you were to verify everyone on the internet for each service that they enter every year, it would cost about $3 trillion.
Not so viable.
Exactly. So the business model doesn't work. And from a user experience perspective, it's a terrible user experience. You just want to say, hey, I just want to go on and access these things. I don't mind if you're passporting this signal across different environments. And that, I think, is a core focus of industry collaboration right now.
So what does that look like? What does a child's passport for gaming look like?
That's KID.
What does it visually look like? When a kid is in an online experience, they land on NCSoft's webpage or World of Warcraft, whatever it may be, and they log in. What is that experience? Can you walk through what that flow is today and what it should be in the future?
I mean, today there is no experience. This is what's kind of terrifying. Any of us in the room have the ability to log into anything instantly with a whole range of different services. You can use Facebook, you can use Line, you can use all these different things to instantly log in. But if you're under the age of 13 or 14 here in Korea, you have no option. And so your only option is to lie, to sign up, even if it's something where ostensibly it's child's content. And so the first thing you need to do is you need to offer that single sign-on option for kids. And you can't just start with that. You need to build the infrastructure layer that deals with all the complexity of regulation. It adapts an age-appropriate experience for Korea. It engages a parent in the right way. You do all of that, and then the very, very last step is having a button that any child can click. And the second they press that, maybe a parent's already pre-approved access, and they get straight in. Or it just adapts. It says, hey, you've told me you're 11. I'm gonna turn all this stuff off until your parent says it's okay. But I'm not gonna stop you getting in. I'm gonna let you get in so that you can immediately engage. And I think that is what single sign-on for kids should look like in a world where I confirm I'm over 13 is no longer an easy out.
What What is the best company you think in child gaming safety in Korea? What is a company that's leading the way? You mentioned NCSoft and Nexon, but is there an example or maybe a CEO of a gaming company, large gaming company in Korea that's taken a leadership role in this topic?
As most of the game companies in Korea are making like mobile RPGs, and those are mostly 15 plus or 18 plus. So like there are only a few companies, few big companies who are mainly dealing with children game, and I guess you probably Nexon, who runs the Playing Smart campaign, and nowadays Smilegate is putting together like inclusivity and those kind of teams to trying to make their game design more ethical. I think it's something that we're also missing out, the ethical game design elements, because we're talking a lot of loot boxes all over the places, and each country have their different approaches. And I've had the opportunity to actually kind of participate and observe how it affects like young kids. Like I was in kindergarten and observing what they do with their Brawl Stars loot box experience during their playtime. And then what they were doing was like they were drawing Brawl Star characters and constructing loot boxes and then playing this like picking out a loot box game. So like, you know, like children used to mimic all the stuff, like that's been their play for a long time. And then what we used to see in kindergarten is that they dress up or like acting out as like Disney characters. But then nowadays, they are not acting out as Brawl Stars characters, but they are mimicking the process of loot box and opening random box. And then it kind of shows them, it's very obvious that to them, this act of picking out a random box and also possessing, owning something out of the box defines fun. So that tells that it's not just we should regulate loot box after they spend too much money or it becomes a problem like societally. But we should really think about what exactly those game systems or the game-like digital systems are doing to our kids. So maybe we can come up with like prevention method, and also like government and industry and like all the like different nations should probably work together toward that. I think we're in the point that we're moving on to see. We've seen a little bit of the concerns popping up in our society, but we haven't really seen the real problems that, and we need to prevent them early enough.
That's fascinating. Well, thank you all very much. We really appreciate everyone here. And yeah, feel free to come up and say hi. We'll just be off stage. Thank you.